sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me.
When we think of our life with the Messiah, what comes to mind?
Well, we should recognize that he is our life. Without him, we were dead in our trespasses and sins. We have the foretaste of the blessings. We have fellowship. We have just the joy, a heart that loves the Scripture.
All because of Messiah?
What's that?
All because of Messiah?
All because of Messiah.
Yeshua, Messiah, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, yo. It is a Wednesday, September 25th, 2019. This is Messiah Matters number 273. Back in the seat with new bobbleheads behind me. My name is Caleb Pegg. It's you, man.
I forgot I was supposed to say something. Without my bobblehead, I left it up. My bobblehead got broken on the way home. There's a chip out of the head. I got a chip off. I got to super glue it. Thankfully, the was in there.
Good. Yes. So at the conference, first of all, we should note that things look different because Rob could not get his computer started this morning.
Well, my monitors, yeah, I don't know what's going on.
His audio's off from his video as well, so he's using his laptop. So quality is not guaranteed in show 273. That's all there is to it. We just got back from Canada. It was a lovely trip. I thought it was a lovely trip. Got to meet all of our good friends. We missed Paul. Paul, we missed you over there. But, so they gave us custom bobbleheads. Last year we got jerseys, which I have here in my office, off camera. They gave us hockey jerseys. And this time, here's the thing, is that if we go back again, I mean, they're setting the bar really high. Where are they going to go from here? Pretty soon, I mean, and now for coming to Teeswater, you get a new car. I mean, come on. Anyway. This one right here is of me. That's my bobblehead. And then this one right here is my father. Yeah.
We need some reading glasses for your dad's.
Yeah, no doubt. This was a dilemma for me. Do we try to put Spurgeon, should my bobblehead be on the same level as Spurgeon, or should we elevate Spurgeon a little higher?
You need a little preaching soapbox.
No doubt. No doubt.
And then on different times, just like whoever's preaching. So
we're starting a bobblehead collection behind me. We're going to need Calvin for sure at some point. Who else?
I think we need Jacob Arminius listening. We need.
Yeah, no doubt.
Listening to Calvin preach.
No doubt. All right. Yeah. Helen was there. It was great to see Helen and her husband, the husband that we thought was in her head. That's a joke, inside joke. We saw a lot of great people, and we had a really good time. Rob preached on the book of Galatians, and I'm convinced that he needs to write a book on this subject, something like The New Perspective on Galatians. It was really good.
I think New Perspective has been just used. It doesn't have any currency anymore. It's like pennies. It's like it's used all over the place.
Okay, how's about this for a title then? Why I'm right and you're wrong about Galatians. Or how's about this? I got an even better one. Yes, I've read Galatians.
Oh.
All right. Well,
it was great. What a wonderful experience. It does take its toll. I got home at about 12:30, so 12:30 a.m. Local time, and it's it takes a lot out of you, for your body to catch up. I'm still feeling like a little bit on Eastern time.
Yeah, and I need to clear something up. After I came back from Canada last year, people thought that I started saying A after that trip. The A actually for me started about 2 years prior to that. when I started watching NHL hockey constantly and listening to the commentators. I picked up the word A. So, just so everyone knows. Anyway, talk about Galatians a little bit. Rob did three lectures on the book of Galatians.
Yeah, it was good. It was I broke it into 3 parts because I had 3 different sections that I did, like you did. But Caleb had the one day where he had 2 sessions in one day, so that was kind of a marathon day for him. But I had a little spread out, so I had 3 days in a row, each with one presentation. And because there's no time to go verse by verse, we're going to read through the whole book and talk about all the things. I chose 3 themes that I thought would be helpful, and trying to be clever. Session 1 was crisis, session 2 was kinship, and session 3 was the king. So I had this crisis, kinship, and the king as the 3 session titles. And so for crisis, I talked about what is going on. Why is Paul so fiery here in this, saying, you foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Like, why is he using this kind of language? What was going on in the communities there? And I said crisis is a good term, not that there's danger, but there's some sort of trouble that needs instant attention. And Paul had been there, but of course now he's writing a letter because he's heard of them being influenced by these people he calls those who are troubling you.
Right.
So we got into there to try to understand kind of the social dynamics of why Paul wrote this letter. Then for the second session, we talked about kinship and how he uses terms like brothers, sons, father for God, Abba, Father. He even says Jerusalem above is our mother. So he uses these, what we call kinship terminology to, ensure that these Gentiles who had come to faith and he had spent time instructing out of the scriptures, that they were full members, and that they are brothers, and that they're fully worthy of table fellowship as brothers, and that we're all we're one family in Yeshua. And so that was the kinship, and that contrasts with what these troublers and other Jewish groups were doing. We're saying you're not a brother, you're not a son of Abraham, right? You're not part of the family unless you join our sect, basically. And then finally, the third session was the king, and I tried to talk about how Paul anchors everything in the love of Yeshua and the gospel, that Yeshua came. One of the most powerful verses in Galatians for me is in end of chapter 2, where he says, he talks about the Son of God who loved me. The faith I live is by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Mm-hmm. And so this idea of Messiah as the king who loves his people, and he gives himself for his people. And on that front, we jumped over to the Gospel of Matthew a little bit. Yeshua's name, when Joseph was told what to name the baby, it says he will save his people from their sins. Mm-hmm. So already, before Yeshua was even born, he already had a people for whom he would and that he would deliver them, and that this is a core anchor, a core historical moment that is important for Paul in Galatians. And it's also important for our behavior, as it says in chapter 6, that we are to love one another, bear one another's burdens, and thus fulfill the law of Christ. And what is the Torah of the king, right? It's what the law of Christ means, right? It's the Torah of the king, and that's in love, and that's in community, right? I can't be a hermit,
right, and
learn to love. Also, if I live as a hermit, I'm preventing other people who are commanded to love me. I'm preventing my own experience of being loved by other people fulfilling the commandment to love me, right? So anyway,
yeah, there was a lot of talk at the conference about community.
Yeah,
which was really
good. Talk about that a little bit, because you intersected with that a bit in your talk.
Yes, yeah, I talked on. I had 3 lectures. One of them was "Is the Trinity Biblical?" And then I did 2 lectures. Basically, I just covered. It was called "Gospel of the Nations," but I covered Acts 8. So the Ethiopian eunuch and the gospel going out to Samaria and things like that. So, well, I'm looking for this verse. Why can I not find it? I'm almost positive it's in Colossians, where it says,
which specific one? Maybe I can find it for you.
It's talking about don't let anyone judge you about feasts and Sabbaths. And
Colossians 2:16.
See, now I looked into. Therefore, let no one pass judgment on you in question of food and drink, or regard to a festival, or ornament, or a Sabbath. See, now here's the other thing. This my accordance must be screwed up because I put in Sabbaths and constrained it to Colossians, and it said that Sabbath was not found in here.
That's weird.
That is wrong. Okay. Anyway, now that I found it, yeah. So, and then at the very end of my last lecture, which was the Ethiopian eunuch, I talked about baptism, and kind of an exploration of how conversion baptism was viewed in the first century, and then brought that back into the end of Matthew 28, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Tried to tie basically my first lecture with my last lecture. You know, I tried a different kind of lecturing this time. The last time I went to Ontario, and times past when I've been in places like the Philippines and whatnot to speak, I've created a keynote or PowerPoint where, you know, you put up a little quote or you put up something that's important to say. So it's like bullet points. And then I just spoke, you know, on those bullet points and kind of expanded on everything. This time what I did was I wrote out everything that I wanted to say. Like I wrote basically a paper and just read the paper and then expanded on that. I got to say, I think I like the first way better. So it threw me off a little bit.
Well, what I liked about what you did, because you had your own handout. So we each had our own handout. So Tim had handouts that were basically replications of the keynote, of the slides, so that people could have all the information. In other words, the handout was exactly the same content. And then he would
as what
talk
was up on the
and
screen.
then expand on things, and people could write notes. Caleb had a nice little booklet handout that had, I think, every single citation,
right,
with the proper, you know, title and page number with the bibliographical notes. So what I liked about that, Caleb, is that people, let's say there was a couple of quotes, they're like, I want to follow up on that. They have all that information there. You've provided for them to, hey, I think I might check out that book from a library at least, or buy it even.
Yeah, but yours was the most interactive because Rob made quizzes that you could do after you listen to each lecture. So 3 quizzes, which is really actually quite
I was
nice.
bummed though, because I never said, let's go through one of the quizzes and as a group. There just was no time. So in terms of the follow-up, I don't know how many people actually went through and did all the quiz work, but I'm hoping at least some of them did.
I saw people doing it.
Oh, good. Okay.
And then, of course, I was informed multiple times that I was mispronouncing Takis, which is the correct way to pronounce it.
One of our most amazing, gracious host families was Caleb found out for the last year
I've mispronounced their last name. I thought it was Kakak.
We had fun with that.
I think we had fun with that. I think that 90% of that family, everyone except for Frank, was just annoyed.
They're like, Caleb.
Yeah, Caleb. No, that's not right. Anyway, so it was a good conference overall. My father presented some new material that he'd written on Bible translations. So
yeah, good stuff.
We'll try to get that put together and put up. And for those who are Messiah Matter supporters, I'll probably put at least the audio into the Messiah Matters More section in the next week. So I know that we've slacked a little bit in putting Messiah Matters More content in, but now you're going to get flooded with a ton of it. So never fear. Okay. Well, let's go to some. We got some interesting emails, and we got also a voicemail that I kind of wanted to look at. This was on the Sabbath, and this was from someone. And by the way, Rob and I got back late Monday night or Tuesday morning, however you want to see it. And we decided that I took Tuesday off because I'd been away from my family for 5 days. You know, my kids are young, and my family's been sick, so I decided to stay home with them. And so we didn't have our normal Monday, Tuesday meeting on what we were going to talk about. So this is all fresh. Rob has not heard any of this, so everything that he says is shooting from the hip. So this could be really fun and interesting, or very heretical. One of the two. We're not sure. I'm playing. Okay, so this is on the Sabbath. This is an email that was written to us. Person says, on this last show, 272, so this was last show. Yeah, last show. On the Sabbath, I was wondering what is prohibited and what is permitted. Some people avoid spending money on that day. So, yes, they do. And the reason why is, well, there's multiple reasons why. But the main reason why is because of Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah. If you go into the book of Nehemiah and read through that prophet, he talks about how people were trying to buy and sell on the Sabbath, and how it was, I don't think he calls it abomination, but he calls it, basically, they knew they weren't supposed to be doing it. He tells them. Now, then the question comes into play, can you create or derive halakha and like commandments from narrative? Now, if you ever go through like my father's class on hermeneutics at Torah Resource Institute, or if you take even at a good Christian seminary like Walter Kaiser in his book, he says that you can't create halakha or like commandments, the way that you should do things, from narrative in the Bible. And a good example of this would be like having multiple wives, right? You can't say, Jacob had multiple wives, therefore I can have multiple wives. That's not how. Anyway, so but yes, the biblical there is biblical precedence to understand, and you could build this actually from the commands of the Torah too. Anyway, so this person says some people avoid spending money on that day. Some avoid cooking food, and this also can be derived from the Torah. Some avoid exercise. Being so new to this, it seems like some things are clear and others are not. We recently enjoyed visiting a park that costs money to get into, but then we just walked and enjoyed the day. But technically, someone had to be there and work for us to purchase entrance tickets. Just curious on what's clear in Torah and what isn't. Not looking to bend rules, but my husband doesn't observe the Sabbath or the Torah like I do and likes to go places occasionally that cost money. Do I abstain? Well, you got a lot going on in that question. And the reason why is because ultimately this comes back to community rule. Ask your local pastor, ask your congregational leaders, because every community is going to be a little bit different. So that would be number one. Number two, a woman who is married to a man, and the man is not Torah observant or Sabbath observant, and now you get into a whole lot of other issues.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts there.
Yeah.
I think at some point you've got the individual,
right?
Then you've got the family, then you've got the community.
Exactly.
And so I think, yeah, for me, a principle is I don't spend money on Shabbat.
Same here.
But as a community, if I'm not going to, bust somebody's chops. It's a difficult issue. That's for sure.
It's a delicate thing, and the reason why is because the group that we're a part of has formed specifically to encourage and to be kind of a bridge, and so we're dealing with people who are, in some cases, not actually. Most of our group is very on board and very Torah observant, but then we got some people who don't think that it's necessarily wrong to spend money. So at what point does the community come in and say, no, how can you put restrictions on a person's personal belief when they're not not with the community?
Right. And so then for the leadership could take a position like, okay, we're going to ask that you don't bring, if you stop by a latte stand or something, and get a coffee. Right. Which is, in the Pacific Northwest, there's coffee stands on every street corner, right, where Caleb lives and where I live. And so people might go, oh, I'll just get a coffee, And what we did is we have one of these commercial Keurig machines, where people put we have a bunch of different, so people could come in and pop a little pod and have their little choice of a drink, that's a convenience. That's something we want to provide. But we would ask people not to bring that into the space, and
Jason,
and sometimes that's not even enough,
Jason comments, he says, when you buy your produce from the store, didn't a farmer work on the Sabbath to get you the crops? Plus, didn't someone stock the items for you? I mean, this is an argument I hear a lot, and people have said, oh, if you sell your products on Amazon, then they're going to be sold on Shabbat. At this point, it's out of your hands.
Yeah, you can only control what you can control.
Right, exactly. And not only that, but we're in the diaspora, and even in the first century, those who, the Romans...
Like, for example, I might buy a product that I bought it on a weekday, but someone might have actually built that product on the Shabbat.
Right.
Now, ideally, if we were in the Yeshua's on the throne and the Shabbat's being observed, when you buy a product during the week at the market, it was built during a weekday,
Right.
And that's obviously the scriptural ideal. It's a beautiful picture, but we have to recognize, like you said, we're still in diaspora. We're, in worldly terms, there's still an exile. We're waiting for Messiah to return, and so we are constantly, at all these different levels, in need of vigilance, but also having to negotiate our situation in order to live. And so that's why Yeshua's teaching of the Torah, how he frames it as love of God is the first and greatest commandment, the Shema, and then love your neighbors yourself is as it. And that if I elevate some sort of community halakha with, mercilessly, then that's a problem.
Well, and look, I've spent money on the Shabbat when I've, ran out of gas, or, you know what I mean? I've given, or when people have asked, like, hey, I need, my family's in need. It's not like I'm not an Orthodox Jew who, won't carry money on the Shabbat. I have a horribly embarrassing story about that in Israel, by the way.
Well, but there's the other thing too of electricity. There's people who won't use it, we won't plug in a crock pot, right? Or drive. That's just an example of how stringent people's choices and their convictions can be. But I don't think there's but you could say, well, someone's running the power company right now. There's a guy monitoring, the power.
Ultimately, personally, I don't buy or sell on the Shabbat. My family doesn't buy or sell on the Shabbat. We tend to try to go places. If we're going to go somewhere on the Shabbat, we try to go somewhere where we wouldn't spend money to get in. But
here's an example, like where in the past, I think this year we're in a different situation, but for SBL, we're in a hotel,
right?
And so what do? Well, obviously we're not paying for it on Shabbat, but the Shabbat's included in the span of time we're there. But what we will do is put do not disturb signs on the door.
Right. So
as to, to prevent the hotel staff from coming in but that's a negotiation, right? We're in a situation where we need to do our best.
Right.
To live by our principles and our convictions, and that's what we do.
Yeah. But ultimately, this comes right back down to something that we've talked about many times. And that is that this is one of the reasons that it's so important to be in community, number one. But we also have to understand the authority structure that the Almighty has put forward for us. In other words, the elders at my community can't come into my home and tell me, oh, you have celebrated the Shabbat incorrectly here. You turned on the light switch. That's, we don't do that, so you shouldn't either.
Right. And I think we should go back to this Colossians 2:16, Caleb. So he says, therefore, let no one judge you in regard to food, drink, respect to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath day. Where I grew up, this was interpreted to say, you can eat whatever you want, you can drink whatever you want. You don't have to keep any festivals, new moons, or Sabbaths. And if anybody tells you otherwise, they're violating this verse.
Right.
That I think that's so silly to think that's actually what Paul meant. What Paul's saying is what you're getting at. Someone from the outside trying to micromanage your growth and learning of walking in the Torah. The whole context of the Colossians is contrasting the commandments of God from the commandments and philosophies of men.
Exactly. And actually, so I was reading Colossians while we were on our trip. I'm on a yearly reading plan, and I just happened to be in Colossians. You know what this actually reminded me of? And I don't want to down the Christian brothers and sisters who have opposed who have opposing views per se. But when we had the conversation with Jeff Durbin and Apologia Radio about the Sabbath, Durbin had come out and said that if a person is celebrating a Saturday Sabbath, then they're bordering on capital H heretic. But then I read this Colossians passage. It says, therefore, let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink, or with regard to a festival or a new moon, or a Sabbath. Well, isn't that exactly
he's actually violating that?
Yeah,
passage.
Isn't that exactly what Colossians tells him not to do?
Exactly.
So, and of course, the one thing that really I was kind of a little bit sad about that entire back and forth is that Durbin and the guys over there, they were so bent on, they said that we were in Phoenix. We're not in Phoenix. We're in Tempe. Oh, they don't know our view on, the millennium. Oh, they don't. It's like these are all these issues that have nothing to do with the conversation.
Distraction.
Yeah, exactly. You're trying. It's almost like you're baiting your audience.
Deflection.
You're deflecting your audience. Exactly. That was what was so
That's
sad
fine.
about that.
I look at it like this: the people who are real intense and really want to know the truth,
right?
They'll climb through all that.
Yeah. But coming back to this question, when we talk about husband and wife, this is when it really gets very sticky. At what point does a wife say, no, I'm not going to do X, Y, Z or whatever? I think this is, and once again, this is why I think it's very important to be in community.
Yeah.
Because those are things that need to be talked out within a community, with community leaders, elders, and people who can give really good advice. Okay, let's move on. This is a good one, but I don't know if we're prepared for it. But you know what? Rob's a clever guy. So get out your Accordance Bible software. Here we go. Titus 3, 9 through 11. This person writes in and says, I was reading Titus the other day and curious on how we interpret Titus 3, 9 through 11. Quote from an NASB, it says, but avoid foolish controversies and genealogies and strife and disputes about the Torah, for they are unprofitable and worthless. Reject a factious man after a first and second warning. Knowing,
it's a heretic. Yeah.
Knowing that such a man is perverted and is sinning, being self-condemned. So I think the real question is controversies, disputes about the strife and disputes about the law.
Right. So what's the question?
What basically, especially in the Torah movement, what is strife and disputes about the law? How do we interpret that?
I think it has to do with people who don't really understand the Torah. Right? People who don't understand the Torah, who are trying to interpret it and teach it, and they really don't know what they're doing. They're twisting it. There's a parallel. Let's see here. What is it? Let me see here.
To be honest with you, I see this as
okay, here's the parallel real quick is 1 Timothy 1:7. It says, for some man strain, okay, I'll read 1 Timothy 1:5 through 7. It says, the goal of the commandment is love from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. Okay, the goal, that's telos. That's the same word that Paul uses in Romans 10, where it says Christ is the telos of the Torah for righteousness unto all who believe. Okay, the goal. The goal of the commandment is love from a pure heart. Okay, what is love? What do you mean love from a pure heart? That's the greatest commandment, right? But then in verse 6, for some men straying from these things, straying from love of God and love of neighbor, have turned aside to fruitless discussion, wanting to be teachers of the Torah, even though they do not understand either what they are saying or the matters about which they make confident assertions. So I think we need to read the Titus passage in concert with 1 Timothy 1 to understand Paul's not saying just don't talk about the Torah. He's warning people to be, because this is where the wolves get their traction. One primary place where a wolf in sheep's clothing gets his traction, right, is through trying to bring some sort of teaching that seems to be from the Bible that gets people attention, right? Oh, like maybe I need to leave my priorities, the Torah of Christ, the law of the King, and I need to start listening to this guy who's got some special revelation or some teaching from the Torah that nobody else, that I got to go there, right? And it's the same thing over and over again. So
can I tell you what comes to my mind? I think honestly, and I hate to burst anybody's bubble here, I think honestly of the Hebrew Roots movement a lot. You have these people who have taken their focus off the gospel, okay, and
they should not be teaching the law,
right? And instead of focusing on the gospel, that in your seed all the nations of the earth will be blessed, and what that means and how that is manifest through us as believers. Instead of
Caleb,
doing that,
I have yet to meet, and this will be a challenge to anybody out there who listens to this show. If you consider yourself Hebrew Roots and you are competent in biblical Hebrew, contact me. I want to talk with you. I want to talk with you. I want to set up a Skype. I want us to open the scriptures, and I want you to read Hebrew, and I'm going to ask you questions about what you're reading, and I want you to explain. Because I have to this day, in 20 how many years of being aware of this Hebrew Roots, it's called Hebrew. The first word is Hebrew. I have yet to meet someone who has competence in Hebrew. The majority of people in Hebrew Roots that are interested in Hebrew they're all in the wrong, they're going the wrong way they're going down dead end streets, they're driving off cliffs, they don't know what they're doing.
Well, Hebrew, yeah. What I see.
My challenge is, if you consider yourself Hebrew Roots and you think you are competent in Hebrew, please contact our offices. We want to talk to you.
Okay. With that said, though, when you look,
they need to strike Hebrew out of their name. That's my point.
When you look at things within the Hebrew Roots movement, like blood moons, the theology, paleo Hebrew, when you word pictures, when you look at things like different calendars, and just on and on and on. It's all this huge distraction that has nothing to do with the gospel message. They say it does, but it benefits no one at all. And I don't want to name names. I went to a conference last year, and there were 3 speakers. One of the speakers decided to go on a huge rant about Hebrew word pictures. Now, what he was trying to do was he was trying to show in the passage that he was speaking on a specific message. By the end of it, what the message was that we as believers should love each other and should see each other's, lift each other's up as brothers and sisters in the Lord, and that there should be no strife between us, but that we should be one in unity. Okay, the passage that he was talking about had that on the surface. You didn't need any Paleo Hebrew to figure it out. That's what the passage said. So, basically he spent 45 minutes on Hebrew word pictures when he could have just said, he could have done the whole thing in 2 minutes and then actually expounded on the text even more. Basically what it was a distraction and a roundabout way and people are, oh my word, oh, this is so amazing. It wasn't amazing. It was a distraction from what should have been taking place, which was preaching the gospel message. Anyway, okay, let's keep going. So that's what I think it means. That's what I think it means. Should we listen to an audio clip now that we've just come off that? I think we should. This is 1 minute and 27 seconds long. The person got cut off. They called in. They spoke for about nine seconds, got cut off somehow, called back in. So it sounds like I come in at a weird place, but it's because the person called back and said, I'm sorry, I got cut off. This is what I had said anyway. So this is her comment.
Myself and a few other families follow the Hillel calendar.
For those who don't know what the Hillel calendar is, the Hillel calendar is the standardized calendar. Came in what, the 2nd or 3rd century CE?
Probably by the 5th century.
Right. Okay, but what it did was it standardized the calendar so that you didn't have to live in Israel. Everyone would be on the same calendar, and it is shockingly accurate when it comes to new moons and these kind of things.
Yeah, they're dealing with the problem of diaspora, obviously.
Anyway, so that's what she's talking about when she says the Hillel calendar.
The Up North Fellowship. Downstate, where I attend, where we rent a church and have weekly Shabbat services. We're on the Hillel calendar also. But there's some people that are doing up north the Vatican calendar, and then I recently found out there are a few others.
Hang on just a sec. For those who are listening, and I found out how many people, there are a lot of people listening on the podcast and not watching this on YouTube. Rob has his head buried in his hands. We're going to keep going.
That are going to be celebrating Sukkot next week because someone from another fellowship downstate flew to Israel and saw that the barley was ripe, and so they're a month early. And I know there are things on the website I can read, and I have started to read some of those, but I'm wondering, what can I say? Maybe just a few tips on what I can say to people when they decide to go off on these different calendars.
Okay, we've talked about this numerous times on this show, and that's totally fine. We'll talk about it again, and this is something that people need to hear because this comes out every single year. First of all, somebody flying to Israel and seeing ripe barley doesn't mean that they have any authority or right to all of a sudden declare anything about the calendar. That's number one.
I think it's divisive.
Of course it's divisive.
And here's the thing. If the people who are following this, what's called tzaddik, the very fact that they're calling it tzaddikite, shows that the people who are the teachers are not to be trusted. So, but if they're all in and they're going to follow that teacher, and that's what, then I would warn them against that teacher. I wouldn't go right to the dispute, the calendar dispute. I would say, we need to look at the teachers you're listening to. And do you agree with everything this teacher is teaching, or the most of what this teacher is teaching?
Look, for me, if you're in an area and you found a group that is celebrating a different calendar than the standardized calendar, okay. The first question I would ask myself is why? Why are they, and are they kicking against the norm in other areas? If they're not,
right.
and their teaching is good, and this is one thing that you disagree with, then you have one of two options. Say, okay, fall in line with the calendar that they're celebrating, at least with the community, and be a part of that community. Or say, no, I'm not going to, and leave the community.
Yeah.
But to come into a community and be like, oh, you guys are doing it all wrong. Yeah, you've been around for 30 years, but who cares? You're all wrong on this, and everyone should conform to the calendar that I think is right. Nonsense.
Yeah, I agree with Caleb. The chances are if someone's pushing that, they're also pushing sacred name, or there's going to be other things against Torah. Something like maybe Nehemiah Gordon would say, like, oh, the rabbis have a ban on the name of God, right? Stand against the ban.
Right.
They've got a thing. Oh, really? Here's the secret. The thing. It's really, this is how you pronounce the name. And really, they try to control when you keep the feast, but really, here's when the feasts are. That kind of leverage, to me, is schismatic. That's divisive, and it's anti-gospel. I think you got a lot of the people who are pushing that. I bet they don't even understand what the gospel message is, and they should not be trusted or listened to. Now, of course, like Caleb said, if you have people you love there, and you want to stay connected, and you want to maybe hold out hope and lead with mercy, then maybe you could, stay connected somehow, but keep the feasts with other people at the right time. But at some point, I don't know how long-term sustainable that kind of it's like trying to have a foot on two different boats. You know what I mean? At some point, the boats are going to start going in different directions.
So I'm not sure what's going on in terms of who shared what where, but apparently somebody shared something, and now we got a couple new people in the chat room, which is excellent. And somebody says, let's see here. I want to go back to this. Courtney says, here we go. Hang on, I'm getting there. Hang on. I was text messaged and told y'all challenge the Hebrew rooters. I'm Hebrew roots. Okay, not a problem. Okay, no, I said we'll get back to it. She said, okay, no problem.
No. And you are competent in
Yeah, hang on just a sec. Wait, hang on just a sec. This same thing came up in Canada.
I can't believe we already discussed this.
And basically, somebody said to me, because I said, look, people have gotten upset at me for challenging the Hebrew roots. And the guy sitting across this table, wonderful believer and gentleman at that, said to me, what do you mean by that? Why would you challenge the Hebrew roots movement? Now, this is a great question and something that needs to be spoken about often. And, I don't know what people think of when they think of Hebrew roots, but that doesn't really matter. Basically, my answer to this gentleman was this. In the 1980s, the late 1980s, the Chernoff and all these guys in the 70s had kind of invigorated this movement. And this movement came out of the Charismatic Church. And the Charismatic Church, basically what they had done, this goes back all the way to the early 1900s, okay? What they had done was they had decided, look, we need to reach Jewish people. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do that by creating a service on a Saturday that looks a lot like a synagogue. And and that'll be attractive to the Jewish people. They'll come in, they'll feel at home. Maybe they've just converted to Christianity, but they'll feel at home. And then we can teach them on a service that they feel comfortable in. Okay, so this is how this all started to form. In the 70s, Chernoff came about, Joel Chernoff, and he's still around today. Anyway, a lot of people know him, I believe, through his music. But Chernoff came around and he said, look, this is great stuff. More people should be doing this. And this movement started in the late 70s. Now, the 80s come around. My father is, now coming to his heritage and whatnot. And so you have the rise of some of these guys who are trying to figure out theologically what they believe. And out of this rises multiple different theological stances. One of them is one law theology, which my father was a champion of all the way back to the late 80s. Okay. And one law theology said the law is not for the Jews only. The law is for the Jews and the Gentiles. Now, this was wrestled
before that, though. Even Caleb, it's not. This isn't just cultural heritage, a celebratory Hebraic sprinkling.
Right.
It actually, there's an obligatory aspect to this, right? That's the first move, and then the move is, well, if it is obligatory, is it obligatory on the whole body of Christ or just Jewish believers, right? And then you have that contrasted with the people who say it's obligatory and for Jews only, versus it's not even obligatory for Jews, but it's culturally appropriate. Sorry, keep going.
No. So this is good. And we got a couple of other conversations going on in the chat room right now, so I'm not going to even look for a few seconds. So basically what happens is that you got this idea of one Torah coming up, okay? Now, at the time, you have groups like FFOZ and whatnot who are also on board with one law theology. Now, what ends up happening is you have this huge, giant exodus. I would say giant, but it started as a slow trickle in the 90s. You have this exodus of Gentiles from coming to an understanding of Torah in the mainstream Sunday Christian church and saying, this is amazing, we should be keeping the Sabbath, or wow, the festivals are enlightening me so much on who Yeshua is and all these things. This is amazing. And so
this is fueled by a book printing industry, right? A book industry of Jewish or Jesus and Jewish background, right? And a bunch of rabbinic works translated into English, Dead Sea Scrolls being published in English, and you have all this scholarship out there in the academic and popular culture that is also fueling this, right? There's a whole industry, a book industry. Think of all the books published from the 80s on about Jesus and the Jewish background for the New Testament. This is all fueled.
Now, this is true. And one of the things that's going on in the early 90s, when my father is starting to champion the idea of one law theology, is that there's another theology. Now, this is going to get confusing for a lot of people because this theology has changed, but there's another theology that's being pushed by a woman named Batya Wooten. And Batya is coming up saying, look, she actually takes from other theological stances, British Israelism and whatnot, but she comes out with her flavor of two-house theology. And what two-house theology says is, if you are a believer, if you're a true believer, then you're actually part of one of the lost tribes of Israel. And so my father and others say, no, this is absolutely wrong because the Gentiles will come to faith in
right. And that
Messiah
if you're a Jewish believer, you're of the house of Judah, right? And if you're a Gentile believer, you're of Ephraim, right? Of the northern tribes. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so then come into the early 2000s, and basically these people who have come into a Torah mindset have said, this is so wonderful. And I've talked about highs and lows, like the spiritual high that you get when you learn something new. And they've had this spiritual high on Torah, and they're like, oh my word, seeing the Sabbath has just blown my mind. Now I understand so much more about the scriptures, yada, yada, yada. But that's not enough. They want more. And so what starts happening? You have Michael Rood at the end of the 90s who prophesies the Great Tribulation starting on 9/9/99. Then you have his second prophecy. You have Monty Judah prophesying the return of the Messiah and the Antichrist.
I think Monty Judah was before that.
You might be right.
Rood. Yeah.
You might be right. Yeah, because his was in like 97, 98. And then you have, it just keeps going. You have all these different...
it's like, hey, I think I'd like to prophesy when the Messiah comes and sell a book.
But so you have this influx of bad theology. You have this horrible view of two-house theology. And granted, I understand that two-house theology has shifted over the past 30 years, and many people who claim to hold to two-house theology do not believe in Batya Wooten's flavor of two-house theology, but I digress. You have all these bad prophecies and people like Michael Rood and Monty Judah who are falsely prophesying. And then you have, even into our modern time, you have the whole blood moon phenomenon. And then you have the Hebrew word pictures and interpreting the Bible through Hebrew word pictures. You have the et theology. The list just goes on. And
bad use of rabbinics, too.
Bad use of rabbinics.
Now is another stream.
Now you got people like Itzhak Shapiro who are straight up peddling a false gospel and trying to bring in Kabbalah into
saying Yeshua is a created being now.
Exactly.
So they're actually kind of more allied with Jehovah's Witness kind of angle.
Right, exactly. So the point is that what ultimately happened, and I believe that this started to happen at the beginning of the 2000s, is that the Hebrew Roots movement, instead of emphasizing the fact of we have been saved by grace through faith, and because of it we love God so much we want to do whatever He says, and that was the initial push. Instead of that, it's what's the new great thing that can tickle the ears?
Right. And what we're trying to do, we're trying to go back to the equipping so that people can just grow in discernment of how to build on rock rather than on sand, so that when these winds of doctrines come, and another important variable along this chronology that Caleb's going over is the rise of the internet. and how wolves have learned to, wow, books sell. If I have something about Jewish and mysteries and Jesus and what's Khan's latest con? The oracles.
Yeah, exactly.
The book of oracles or the book of mysteries and all this kind of stuff. Those books sell because they have a sizzle. You know what I mean? People like, oh, this is like the latest revelation, and they're literally, making money. They're just taking it to the bank, and they're not anchored in the truth.
Right. But ultimately, the point is that it comes from an identity crisis. We're no longer part of the church, and this is a wrong way to think. What we should say
you're
is,
right. Well, I think there's people in the church that stay in the church, but they still buy Khan's books.
Oh, of course. But my point is the idea of people saying, "Oh, I'm not Christian. I'm Hebrew roots." No, the believers are all one ecclesia. And the idea that we have to come up with some new name, no, the name Hebrew roots has been tainted by a rejection of deity, a rejection of all sorts of, good theological issues that men and women literally died.
It's water that's been sat out, and it's got algae and mosquitoes and
exactly. And
putrid. That's putrid water.
And there are some good people who want to hold on to that name, Hebrew roots. Okay. That's up to you, but I'm not putting my name up there with people like Khan and Biltz and Shapira and Rude and Judah and all the. I mean, why would I ever want to in any way? It's the same reason it's the same reason I stopped wearing a kippah. I don't want people to associate me with an unbeliever, and I don't want people to associate me with false prophets and bad theology. The fact of the matter is that Christianity, by and large, up until the 1900s, believed that the law was a good thing. What's one of the first catechisms questions in the Westminster shorter catechism? What is sin? Sin is any want of conformity unto or transgression of the law of God.
Right.
So it's the push in the
foundation for the reformers is the positive view of the law of God. So the difference then is how it's taught and understood. That's where the difference is. But they're definitely when does the law's done away? Is it about 100 years old? How old is that idea?
I think even more recent than that, because you have things like, look, I'm not trying to argue that the mainstream Sunday Christian church has not made some big missteps from a very, very, very long time ago, 2nd century at least. Things like, the Sabbath was changed to Sunday. But let's give a little bit of credit where credit is due. The church also, this mainstream Christian church, Sunday-keeping Christian church, also said the Sabbath is a very important thing. It's just moved to Sunday. In fact, in the 1689 Baptist Confession, they talk at length about how important the Sabbath is. My Presbyterian friends today continually say that the Sabbath is a very, very important thing, but that it's just been changed to Sunday. Now, I'm not saying that's right. Please don't hear that either. But what I'm saying is...
But they are valuing, conceptually, they haven't rejected the concept outright.
Right. So, now granted, I will fully admit that the mainstream Sunday-keeping church has rejected the festivals. That's a problem. And I don't understand why anyone would ever want to do that. Anyone who sits down and celebrates Passover and understands the implication of what the Messiah said and did during his Last Supper should rejoice at the fact that we have this wonderful, wonderful festival.
Oh, wow. Amen.
And to think that we should just throw it out and shouldn't do it anymore, or that it should change to a different festival, is ludicrous. Yeshua says, do this in remembrance of me. I mean, come on. But the point is that the notion that the Torah is bad or whatever is a mainstream Christian idea that has come about, I think, especially strong since the 80s, when we started to see a rise of Torah observance among believers. And it continues to rise, right? We continue to get pushed against. Somebody says, Caleb, but the Sabbath changing is similar to lunar Sabbath and not a bunch of smack talk about that in the Hebrew roots movement. Lunar Sabbath is ridiculous. And I you know,
that's another one that kind of emerged over the last 20 years.
Right. I'm not saying that the mainstream Sunday Christian church is right by changing the Sabbath to Sunday. What I'm saying is that there's this gradual downplay of Torah in general within the mainstream Christian church, and it's taken a nosedive in the past 30 to 40 years. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's right. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the chat. There's a lot going on in the chat room right now. So, yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is that, what does Coasty Hinn say? He says, be solid in theology and flexible with people. Isn't that the truth? And we're all on our own, we're all on a journey, right? We're all on this journey of trying to please the Lord, not because we are going to gain favor with the Lord by doing the right thing. Those who are justified through faith from the foundations of the world. But rather, we love him because he first loved us.
Amen.
You know, there was a comment way back here. I want to go back to it real quick and see if I can find it. By Jason. And I'm not exactly sure what his point was. He says, I'm a little confused. Please help me understand. If God tells us that no man knows the day or the hour that Yeshua will return, if that goes with the feasts, then how can we go with a set calendar? I'm not sure what you mean. That doesn't go with the feasts. I think it's a Christian and or Hebrew roots invention that Yeshua has to return on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Teruah, or that he has to come back on Sukkot. Once again, it's a nice thought, but there's nowhere in the text that explicitly states this. The fact of the matter is no one knows the time or the hour. Even your even your teacher in the Hebrew roots who says that he's got to come back on a Yom Teruah. The Lord will come back when the Almighty God has decreed it, and not when some teacher supposes it's going to happen. This is one of the problems with all these people saying, "Oh, he's coming back on this date." It's not the only problem. Don't get me wrong, but it's one of the problems. Okay. I mean, we've talked a lot. I don't know if we. Yeah. Do we have anything else? I mean, I have other things, but should we save for next week?
Yeah, we could save for next week.
We're gonna try to get Rob's stuff worked out, his computer worked out, so that it's not the same.
Yeah, we'll get that figured out.
I want to thank everyone who supports this show.
Sponsored by Ace Religion Supply, where they say, if we don't got it, it ain't holy.
Especially our producers. If you want to buy a producer credit, you can do so, but I would hold off until next week. We are going to design a new mug for our fall producers, and then we will next week. I'll let you know if it's time to start going on that.
So next week we'll be into the fall feasts. So we're coming up here this weekend. Will be Yom Teruah,
Terry,
also known as
hang on just a
Rosh
second.
Hashanah.
I feel like Terry Perry has not listened to a lot of our shows. Wish you guys would go on tour, speaking events. We just got back, man.
Someone sent us a note saying, what would it take to get you to come to Central Georgia?
Not a lot, because I got a lot of family in Georgia. I'm ready to go.
All right.
Yeah, here's the thing, listeners, please listen. If you want us to come and speak at your congregation, or if there's a event that you want us to speak at, all you got to do is send us an email, and we'll try to start looking at whether or not the Lord wants us to go or not. Come to Georgia, Christina says. Okay. Ohio, I got a lot of family. You see, this is the funny thing. I got family in in Georgia, and I got family in Ohio. So here's what my family personally, my wife and my 3 kids and I have talked about: flying into Ohio and then renting a car and driving over to New York to see my sister, and straight down to Atlanta to meet the rest of the people. Because My grandmother has not met a lot of her great grandchildren. No, yes, that's what her great grand. Yes.
Yeah, that would be great, and you could make some stops along the way. Contact us. Yeah. So
Yeah,
someone on the Facebook said, when are you coming to Georgia? So contact Caleb or me, and we'll get talks going.
Georgia would be great because there's a lot of great hotels that we could rent a room out of if we needed to. There's also churches, I'm sure, that would that we could use a room in. We can't do it all ourselves. We need people to help us organize these kind of events. So
on that note, the hospitality we experienced in Ontario was
set the
superb.
bar so high. They set the bar so high. Dude, did they send your wife a care package?
Yeah.
Yeah, they sent my wife a care and my mom a care package as well. Yeah, unbelievable.
So sweet, so self-sacrificing, generous, accommodating. It was just amazing, and it made being away from home a lot easier, easy, so smooth and so easy. So thanks again to the dear hearts in Ontario there. Eh?
Christina, you start by sending me an email. chegg@torahresource.com. It's chegg@torahresource.com. That goes for anyone. I see people saying Tennessee, Oregon. Oregon would be easy because I'm right above Oregon. Ohio, Houston, and Georgia. Just send the emails. The email address is up on the screen right now. It's chegg@torahresource.com. Send me emails, and we try not to travel too often because it's hard on the families. I got a newborn as well, so
it's looking like, just so people know, it looks like next July, our team will be traveling to New Jersey.
Right.
So we'll just put that's a year out, but
we'll be in New Jersey next July, and in this coming November we'll be down in San Diego, and then let us know. We're always willing, as long as the Lord opens the doors and my wife says yes. Okay, it's been
That's
fun.
one of the doors.
Yeah, that is one of the doors. You got to get through the gatekeeper first, and she is the gatekeeper. All right, well, it's been fun, and we're so happy to be back. Thanks again to all the people in Ontario who made the stay just a wonderful one. We hope that this conversation has, its main goal is to do one main thing. That is to glorify our great God and Savior, Yeshua, the Messiah. Why? Well, because Messiah matters.